gang, welcome back to System Breakdowns. As always, I'm Greg Koval, and today we're talking about Alex Poatan, or Stone Hands, Pereira. Very aptly nicknamed guy. Really a great case study when you talk about building a system around a particular attribute or a technique that you've specialized in. In this case, you're talking about a very tall fighter at 6'4" who has a devastating left hook. He is very known. He's knocked out a lot of people with it. He does heavy damage with this left hook. And so he's really a great case study for building a system around this attribute and this technique. We're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about some of the adjustments that he made coming over from kickboxing into MMA and how that has served him really well when we talk about adjusting your style based on rule set. So, excellent case study. I'm excited to break them down. So let's get right to it. So the first thing I want to talk about is some of the defense that he utilizes and how that has shifted from Glory Kickboxing over to the UFC. It's a very important thing to distinguish, and it kind of gives a lot of credence to things that I said in my Peekaboo Philly Shell video where I talk about why it's not used in MMA. He's a really good case study for this, and he kind of exemplifies a lot of the things I talk about in there, and he has definitely transitioned in the right way, which has allowed him to be so successful. Now, if you look at how he kickboxes, a lot of times he keeps his hands high, and as guys start throwing things, he goes to a high shell, he absorbs, and as they start pressing in, he switches to like a Philly shell and lets his shoulder kind of be in the way. And what this essentially does is as guys start throwing, they absorb, they can't penetrate through because he stays tight and he's rolling with it also, meaning that they can't just penetrate through this hand, both because of the width of the glove and because of the rotation of the arms that kind of deflects this stuff off and takes a lot of that bite off of the punches of his opponent. As this happens, he tries to close this gap and he tightens it up and gets his shoulder forward. What this means is they can no longer come straight down the pipe on him, and they start coming around and start throwing hooks and stuff like that. And what ends up happening is as he tightens up here, rotate, come in with the Philly shell, as they start throwing punches, they wrap around, and they end up in a clinch. The ref then disengages them, separates them off, and they reset. So essentially what he does is he stays tight, absorbs, and as they start throwing bombs, if he feels like he can't change this situation, he just closes the gap here and forces them into an unintended clinch, because as they wrap around, he's closed it off, so they have to wrap. Very, very nice system. Generally speaking, as he presses forward, he just kind of absorbs a lot here, right? And then he opens up with his own shots. Now, in MMA, he has shifted this. What you see a lot more out of him defensively in MMA is a lot more outside range. He stays at the kicking range. One of the advantages he has at being 6'4" is his striking range is a lot further than theirs. So he stays just on the outside so that he can land his punches with a small step. But that means for them to reach him, they have to cover a lot more ground. It also means that defensively, it gives him more response time for takedowns. It gives him the ability to defend kicking as opposed to a lot of punches coming at him. So he's very good at defending kicks, much better than a lot of the other people in that division. So as guys start throwing kicks at him, you know, he can start tightening up, he can start backstepping, he can start checking, things like that, start turning away. You'll see a lot of that stuff out of him because all he has to do now is defend the kicks. And then what he does is as he enters range, you see a lot of top position principle, tying up the hands, getting on top, allowing him to start throwing his bombs down the lane because he's going to trap, clear the lane, and throw bombs. And this is a very, very nice technique. Meanwhile, on the outside, he's going to start using that big, powerful kick that he has, attacking the leg. As he enters in, you know, he'll throw some shots, and then he'll start going to leg and level change and stuff like that. We'll talk about that more in offense. But in the meantime, as they start throwing punches back at him, he can just take this hand up here, and he kind of goes to a long guard as he retreats off, goes back to his outside range, top position, throws his bombs, they come at him. He can just kind of absorb in a long guard, disengage, and reset at the outside range. So one of the things that's really impressive about him is how naturally he falls to the range that he wants to be at. This is a thing that it's very hard to teach. It's a learned skill through a lot of experience and a lot of sparring and a lot of fighting. Being able to naturally create the range that you want that's ideal for you is very much a skill that you have to practice, and he is exemplary at it. He is very good at this. So that's the difference that you're going to see. So instead of doing a lot of, you know, trying to shell up in MMA, where not only are these lighter gloves going to do damage to his arms and stuff like that and start wearing down his guard, but there's a lot more penetration risk, a lot more damage, and it's easier for him to just stay on the outside and use his longer reach. Now, Alex Pereira has some preferred techniques that he really likes to use. Obviously, his favorite technique is going to be the left hook. We're going to talk today about how he uses the left hook in several different ways. He uses it as one-off to just kind of throw stuff. He uses it as a punctuation, so that here, he punctuates almost all of his combinations with that left hook. And then thirdly, he does use this, of course, as a counter, where he starts drawing back into the left hook using luring. So the left hook is obviously his favorite weapon. He's going to do everything he can to set that up. However, he has a couple other weapons that he likes to use as well. He likes to use a level change roundhouse kick, particularly with this right foot. And what he really likes to do is kick over the shoulder and kick straight with this roundhouse kick. One of his natural attributes, part of it is because he's so tall and he just has the right type of kick. A lot of guys, when they throw roundhouse kicks, tend to come upward at a 45. This means that if I'm fighting an orthodox fighter, this head kick becomes very difficult. I tend to get caught on the shoulder a lot. So a common tendency is for guys to not want to kick to the head on that side unless they've done something to open it up. But he's really good at starting to tie up these hands, getting them distracted, and then he comes up and over with any kicks. And this is something that is a very high-level, correct style of kick. I really enjoy seeing this where it's more of a straight across kick rather than kicking upward, which is what you see out of a lot of guys. So when he's in here, he's just standing on the outside, he's throwing his bombs, and then it's almost more like a question mark kick, the way that he comes up with it first. Very, very clean kicking. So that's a technique he likes to use a lot. Third is he likes to use knees. He's got devastating knees. I see this a lot out of really tall fighters because they have so much more access with the knee from right here to be able to easily hit a chin. As me, at 5'10", 5'11", it's harder for me to go up against somebody who's about 6 foot and pull this knee up. At 6'4", he has a lot more accessibility. It doesn't take a lot to pull guys down into it. For me, I've got to do a little bit more to draw them down into it by kicking to the body, forcing them to just drop down to defend, and then coming up. He doesn't have to do that. So that's a natural attribute that he's able to use. Other really tall guys tend to do this. John Jones was really good at this, for example. So the knee strikes is another one. Finally, he does like to occasionally throw a spinning crescent kick. He doesn't do it all the time, but it's kind of just to mix things up so that as he's in here striking, you'll see him sometimes coming in here. And it's a crescent kick, not a turning wheel kick, which I find interesting. And I don't know if that's just a preferred technique, although my gut tells me, based on the way he throws it, it's so that after he throws it, he can end up square off and still able to throw punches. So I think that might be a little bit of kickboxing experience and just his personality coming into play. So instead of throwing this big spinning hook kick with the turning wheel kick, and if you don't land, you kind of thud and stop. He prefers the spinning crescent kick where as he comes into here, he can still stay squared off and continue to fight. So it's an interesting choice. So those are the 4 preferred techniques he likes to use. Now let's talk a little bit about how he likes to set this stuff up. Let's start with the hook. One of the things I really enjoy is he has a very heavy cross as well. Generally speaking, early on, he's going to do a lot of light shots to set up his big shots. So he comes in here top position, he throws these body jabs, level change, he throws light shots, gets you thinking about this, comes in, throw occasional leg kicks in here. So he's in here, while you're thinking about hands, he throws the occasional leg kick just to kind of mix it up a little bit. And then he throws a heavy cross. Now, if he can land it, that's great. He's looking to try to connect clean on this. And then come up to his 3. So he likes to go to that 2-3. But what I really like about what he does with this is whenever he throws this cross, he drops his head. And the reason he does that is so that if he happens to miss, he's in this great position to really put power behind that hook. And this is something that you'll see him do a lot, where he'll either land it, and as he comes up, this is what he did to Israel Adesanya, is as he threw the cross, he was at this downward angle, so as he threw the hook, it ended up coming up almost more like an uppercut, so as they're defending the side of their head, he comes a little bit more upward to the chin. But also, if you think about the tremendous power, even if he misses here, and even if they block, man, that is a technique that is going to hurt, even through the block. It's like eating a turning wheel kick through a block. You're still going to feel it. Eating a head kick through a block, you're still going to feel it. So that's a technique he really likes to do. Low jabs on the outside, top position, throw this, stay on the outside so they can't access, and then that big combination is probably his favorite. You'll see him use this a lot. Then from there you start seeing him use the Dutchie, which is using a hook to attack the leg. He makes people afraid of the hook so that now they start planting whenever he throws it as a one-off. When he does that, he can follow through with a leg kick. Or then he starts to level change on it. So he throws this, and then he comes up to the head kick. That's the type of stuff you'll see him do with a lot of that type of level changing. Coming up here, getting into defend, coming back to the body. That type of stuff works really, really well. I'm a big fan of this technique of getting them to plant because when you throw the hook, they put their weight on this leg, makes it a very devastating attack, or it gets them to drop their head a little bit, making it easy to hit this head. So that combination I'm a big fan of anyway, and he's very good at using this. So that's the majority of what he's going to do. The other thing that he's going to do, I might as well throw this in for counters because his favorite counter is he likes to lure people back. So he throws his attacks, he backs off a little bit, and guys start coming forward because he's disengaged. And what he does is he gets them, and as they start coming forward, he drops, and he is super accurate and super powerful with that hook, and he has dropped a lot of really good fighters using it. So that's the majority of what you're going to see out of the hook attacks. Like I said, he'll throw it as a one-off, but then like I said, a lot of times whenever he throws combinations, he might throw a little shot and then punctuate it with that a lot of times. So here, right, really punctuating with these big hooks whenever he can. Throwing a leg kick and just punctuating. All right, so that's the majority of what you're going to see for the hook. Now, for the knee strikes, what you'll see a lot of times is one of two different entries for it. Either he's going to go to top hand position and start pulling these hands down to clear the lane and come up. This is a thing that you see, I think, against Sean Strickland, this is how he caught him, if I remember correctly, where he starts coming in here, clearing the hands, throwing some techniques, and then he starts getting on top, clearing the lane, and coming up. And I think in the case of Sean Strickland, if I remember, he did a flying knee where he cleared the hands and comes up with this technique, particularly as Strickland starts coming down into it and makes it nice and easy to really knock guys out with it. The only thing you'll see him do is some sort of a penetrating technique where he throws some sort of like a cross or an uppercut or something like that, and then as he does so, he follows up with a nice knee to the head. And what he does is essentially he's penetrating through the guard, clearing this lane, getting them thinking about this thing that's in their face, and as they start to recover, they eat the knee. He is a big fan of either clearing hands or penetrating through the hands to come up to these techniques. The spinning crescent kick he does as a one-off, as a once-in-a-while thing, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It's just kind of a once-in-a-while thing that he likes to put up there. The final thing, so let's see. We had the hook, the head kick. That's basically just a level change that he does off of it so that as he starts throwing this hook, he gives himself opportunities to start coming up to different levels on this. So that's the majority of what he's going to do for his favorite striking. Honestly, that's the majority of his system right there. Stay on the outside, throw some attacks. If they start throwing back kicks and stuff like that, it's very easy for him to defend on the outside, get to a top hand position, throw some light punches, throw a big shot, punctuate with the hook, throw the occasional hook one-off, throw the Dutchie, attacking it here, coming to the outside, with that big roundhouse kick over the shoulder that's very hard to defend. And as they start coming in, luring them back into a counter hook, and then getting on top, throwing these one-offs, and then clearing the lane to get to these knee strikes. This is the type of stuff you'll see out of him from his striking standpoint. Okay, so don't want to spend a lot of time on the clinch and cage work for him because it's just not an area that he specializes in, but I want to talk about it because I want to show how you can do just enough to put yourself in the realm of where you want to be. He's not a great grappler. He is a very competent clincher, though. And what you will see a lot of times is that if he ends up in a situation where he starts getting a head in a bicep or something like that, you'll start to see overhook and frame, where he can start getting good control, pushing their head away, and start landing his knees and stuff like that. That's obviously great for him. But generally speaking, when you talk about him defending against the cage, this is something he's going to have to worry about a lot in his career. He hasn't experienced it a lot. He did a little bit against Michelino, was a guy he had to experience this with, but he hasn't experienced this on the highest level. I think when he starts talking about guys like Marvin Vettori, you're going to start seeing that being a bigger concern of a guy putting him back against the cage and him having to really defend that takedown against somebody who's just going to be consistently going after it. But what he does seems to work pretty well, and I think it'll hold up and stand up against like guys like that as well. The same thing with like Derek Brunson. That's another guy he's going to have to deal with at some point. That takedown game is going to be challenging. Now, fortunately, because of his outside range, his kicking range, he has a lot of response time and the ability to sprawl out on this. And he's proven that he's more than capable of doing this. And he's really good at not staying engaged, even if he does sprawl on guys. You know, it's really tempting when you get on a top position to want to take advantage of that. He's smart enough to know, look, this guy's better on the ground than I am. I'm going to disengage and reset. Even though he works with Glover Teixeira, he knows that he's not a grappler at heart. You know, if you look at some of his earlier fights, he's had some issues. In the Michelina fight, that was a situation where he did just enough to keep that fight standing so that he could win through a standing bout. And that was the smart tactic, you know. Michelina did a lot to get to this outside leg and start breaking him down, getting to a back control. And as he started getting broken down, he took his time, worked the hands, finally manages to escape. He gets broken down, comes back up, and does that essentially. But what I wanted to point out is this. When he gets backed up to the cage, what I find interesting is he focuses on an overhook. It's what he likes to use. Whether it's an overhook with a frame to start hitting strikes, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of that. I have a whole straight arm lock series that I like to use. But from right here, he likes to get a strong overhook. And then this free hand here, he mostly uses it as bicep control. He's starting to learn to head fight a little bit, but it's not there yet. He needs to get a little bit better at that, in my opinion. But he keeps a very nice wide base. And with a guy with his length of frame, it's going to make it very hard for guys to pull up those legs when they have an underhook. And he's got a strong overhook on top of that. That's going to make it very challenging for them to try to change levels. And that's what he's mostly concerned with, is guys trying to go down to the legs. So he's going to keep him pinned up top with this overhook. Then from here, this free hand, he's going to use this to block any incoming strikes. And, you know, if possible, now he can start to use this to try to create some space and to try to separate off. And that's what he really is looking for. Mostly he understands he can't let them get a wrist control here. He can't let them have a lot of access to his legs, so he keeps nice and wide and keeps them up against the cage so it's difficult to access. And then he separates off, which is the smart move. He doesn't want to engage in a long striking bout there, and he definitely doesn't want to engage in long grappling bouts. And so at this point in his career, he's realized, look, if I knock a guy down on the ground, get back up. He fights from an outside range, so if guys try to shoot at him, he has a lot of response time. And he knows, if I sprawl on him, I'm going to keep it standing. But that's really all I want to kind of note on this is that he's a guy who understands if you have a little bit of basic takedown defense and you have a much better striking system, you can get really far. And I think that's going to carry him through the Derek Brunsons and the Marvin Vettoris in this division, where he's going to have to deal with wrestlers. And from out here, they're going to have a hard time accessing because he's going to be throwing a lot of kicks. He's going to be at an outside range where he can easily sprawl on guys. And then if they do back him up to the cage, he's going to overhook to keep them from going down to the legs and just start framing off here, taking his time, picking occasional shots here, and then separating himself off. It's a very, very adequate system for what he's trying to do. Could he go to the next level eventually? I'm not sure. Working with a guy like Glover Teixeira, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start eventually adding in the Uchimatas and stuff like that. And if he does, I think it'd be wise to keep them down there and stay up, right? Work on getting back to your feet rather than trying to out-specialize a guy there. I think over the long term, it's going to do him credit. It'll do him some good to get better at it, but I think that right now, you know, stay where you specialize. Keep the fight on your terms, I guess is what I'm saying, which is a really important aspect of the Nemean fight system where we always want to keep the fight on our terms. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure you share it with your friends.